age, maintaining bone health and preventing falls becomes critical. Hello, I'm the host Alice, and joining us today is Dr. Deborah Kado, a renowned geriatric specialist and co-director of the Stanford Longevity Center, to shed light on this essential topic. So welcome to our show, Dr. Kado. How is everything going today?
Thank you so much, Alice, for your kind welcome, and it's going well.
Okay, so Dr. Kado, could you delve into your latest research trends? What's on the horizon for reducing the risk of recurrent falls among seniors, in your opinion?
Well, what is on the horizon is the fact that our population is rapidly getting into the age group of 65 and older. In terms of the research that has been going on to reduce falls, that has been going on for probably longer than you have been alive. So we have multiple randomized controlled trials, which are considered the gold standard evidence to show whether an intervention works or may not work. And fortunately, we have multiple trials in the area of fall prevention that have been endorsed and repeated in multiple populations at risk for falling. So older adults over the age of 65, for example. And the best interventions have been, in general, exercise interventions to reduce the risk of falls. And generally, these interventions have been maybe 1 hour 3 times a week for anywhere from 3 months to a year, and have reduced the risk of falling substantially. One particular type of exercise that has been replicated in multiple trials has been the practice of Tai Chi. And if you have seen any videos or been fortunate enough to visit China, for example, that's a very popular activity to do in the community. And as a practicing osteoporosis doctor and geriatric specialist, when people who have been born in China come to see me, and they're concerned about, say, a very low bone density that they get on the screening bone density scan called DEXA, they are actually able to squat down to the floor and get up without their use of the arms, which I would have to say many of my Western counterparts in terms of patients who are of the similar age are worried even to get down to the floor because they might not be able to get up without assistance. So certainly the fall prevention in terms of balance, exercises, and keeping active is the key thing. So that's not new. That's just that people are unaware. But when I say horizon, I think now that more and more people are crossing that threshold of age 65, they're becoming more aware of what the implications of a fall might mean. So falls are very common over the age of 65. Maybe 1 in 3 in Canada or in the United States will report having a fall in a year, and about 5 in 100 will have a pretty serious injury as a result to that fall. And one of the things people really worry about are hip fractures. So I think on the horizon, what needs to happen is an increased awareness of this problem that can be prevented.
So you did mention Tai Chi being one of the exercise routines that's really beneficial. I'm curious about what other exercise or maybe even dietary advice you could give.
Sure. So Tai Chi has been replicated multiple times, but it's really this idea of being present in one's own body. I sometimes have patients come and tell me, well, I'm just clumsy, so I trip and fall all the time. Well, the truth of the matter is now if you do that, there could be worse consequences that could be long lasting. So don't accept yourself as being clumsy. Like, don't be clumsy. Live in the moment. Think of where you are and be aware of your environment. And what I didn't mention just previously is that while I said the exercise trials are the most effective, there's certain things like what the environment looks like, what your home environment looks like, your outside environment. So, in the East Coast where you are, where it snows, one will have to be more careful when the snow turns to black ice and then you're much more likely to fall. So environmental factors, when people pay attention to the environmental factors, that will reduce the risk of falls. The number of medication one takes, there's certain types of medications that are associated with increased risk of falls and fractures. So to discuss with your physician, what are the things that you can do to decrease your risk of falls, besides just the exercise, is important. And when I say about being aware of one's body, somebody's space in trying, besides Tai Chi, just when you stand up, for example, are you standing with your feet further apart or closer together? And if they're further apart, maybe try to adjust your feet to be closer together. And if that, you notice your balance kind of being off, that means you may need extra certain instructions on how to improve your balance, or just even standing on one leg. Is that possible? And practicing those types of challenges to balance. So athletes, for example, get knocked over all the time, but they learn how to fall. And so older adults can similarly do that. So it's kind of a multifactorial approach. And if someone is unsure, has never done this, is clumsy, that's the time to think about, well, maybe I need to see an expert, such as a physical therapist, to help me get on a program to improve my balance to decrease falls. So you also asked about diet. So diet is a very important factor as well to consider. And I think that what has been shown in multiple kind of large studies, just observing what people do and what they eat and how they do health-wise, I think there is pretty much a consensus across the world that fresh fruits and fresh vegetables on a daily basis are very healthy, and really maximizing non-processed foods. So those are the types of foods that don't live on your shelf for more than, a few months, as opposed to a couple of years. And also a varied diet of a variety of different fruits and vegetables are good. And olive oil also seems to be a great dietary kind of food to focus on in terms of oils. The Mediterranean diet, I'm sure you've probably heard about, has been highly touted, but there are certain long-lived communities across the world, and they eat different diets, and yet they are known for kind of healthy eating. So we're talking from Sardinia in the Mediterranean that follows those older individuals tend to follow Mediterranean diet. And you may have heard of Okinawa, one of the first blue zones identified. And by blue zones, these are communities across the world that are known for their longevity, where it's very much a fish and vegetable based diet, versus Costa Rica, where they're extremely long-lived individuals who eat a very high plant-based diet, or Loma Linda, California, even, where it's predominantly a plant-based diet. So I think you're hearing fruits and vegetables and non-processed foods, and that will help not only your bone health and muscle health, but overall health as well.
I am a little curious though, because I would assume sometimes it might be a little difficult for some people to get those fresh fruits and vegetables into their diet. Is there any recommendations of ways that people can include that more into their diet in a sort of realistic manner?
That is a great question, Alice, because access to food is not something that we can take for granted, especially when you don't have a garden, or whether that's amenable or even funds to be able to pay for such food. So it's amazing, though. For example, in Costa Rica, it's not known for its high economic, wealth, and yet they have made it work in terms of taking advantage of the local fruits and vegetables that are present in their environment. But for someone, say, living in an urban area, and it's hard to get to the store because it's snowy outside and the weather prohibits getting there, or transportation, whatever, flash frozen food, fruits and vegetables do tend to maintain the nutrients that scientists view are as important, as opposed to, say, canned or jarred fruits and vegetables that tend to be preserved with a lot of sodium and things like that. So frozen, okay, if you have access to a freezer. And sometimes those are just not as expensive either. The other thing to bring up is some of the research that I've done has been in the gut microbiome, and I do want to give a special shout out to fermented foods. And a lot of cultures do depend on fermented foods for precisely what you've said, and those can be very, very healthy for the gut microbiome. So, for instance, sauerkraut to kimchi to what they call natto or fermented soybeans. So all over the world, pickles, etc.
Right. Wow. Thank you so much for that. That basically concludes this segment, but thank you so much. And we are going to tune back in soon.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details. On Rogers TV.
Long way from Nashville, and mama, I tell you that. Performed from Montreal to Boston to Los Angeles. But Toronto, that's my chosen home. Sure, when I'm walking down Yonge Street, I see some funny people who have the nerve to point the finger at me. And grin and smile and whisper. My song was #2 on local radio. It sold 10,000 in Toronto alone. Turned down Ed Sullivan because they asked me to remove my makeup. Wouldn't do American Bandstand because of their segregation policies. I was just being me. Never tried to explain myself to anyone. And besides, none of that to worry, Jackie, because I know I look good. Got a new way of loving, baby. Thought I want to teach it to you.
Jackie Shane was a pioneer transgender soul singer, a central figure in the Toronto R&B scene. She helped shape what we know as the Toronto sound.
Okay, so welcome back. Now I'm quite curious, Dr. Kado. So I'm eager to hear about your future plans in aging and bone health, particularly in harnessing AI or digital technology. Could you provide some insight into what's next on your agenda?
Wow. Well, that's a complicated question because there is a lot on my agenda. So let me first start with the fact that while I'm a geriatrician and a medicine doctor who specializes in osteoporosis and bone health, since arriving to Stanford over 2 years ago, I have also become the co-director of the Stanford Longevity Center that was founded by Laura Carstensen, a very famous psychologist and professor here at Stanford. This center was first started in the around 2009 or so. And since about 2018 or 19, or maybe even more recently, she and those at the center have been thinking about reconceptualizing our lifespan, because now a child born today can potentially expect to live to be 100 years old. So a century-long life, as opposed to thinking, oh, we're going to retire at 65 and then go off into the sunset. That just is kind of becoming obsolete. So we really have to re-envision what a century-long lifespan will look like. And as a physician, really looking to match the health span with the lifespan, so that and really being able to think about that as a possibility. Because I think as a society, there have been a lot of negative attitudes regarding getting older, thinking of it as kind of a downhill course, or just retire and then hopefully have some vacation and then there's no definition. In fact, if you go on the website and you look at lifespans, you'll have pictures of people starting from infancy to toddlerhood to childhood to preteen to tween to young, adolescent to young adult to an adult who hopefully is gainfully employed to then retirement sometime, I guess, in their 60s. And then the picture is of someone in a wheelchair. And the fact of the matter is that that does not represent our aging population very well at all. In fact, multiple research studies suggest that as we get older, we become far more heterogeneous. And we as a society have not been great at kind of realizing that. Everybody seems to be getting on the anti-aging bandwagon when you're lucky if you get to be the age of 65. And a lot of people who are age 65 and older are really enjoying life and living vital lives. So I guess when I think about this in the new map of life, and that's what they call it, like why are we thinking that education ends after, if you're, high school or college or graduate school? Shouldn't learning be a lifelong passion for people? And why are we trying to get everything done in our 30s and 40s? Meaning maybe if you're lucky, you finished education, you get a job, you get married, you have kids, you do all these things, and then you ride up to the sunset. Why does it all have to be done at one time? Shouldn't we think about possibilities of serial meaning not like the cereal in the morning, but like different careers spread out over decades, for example. And then also just thinking about our environment. How are we treating our environment? How are we going to best ensure equity and access to care and food and safe living across the globe? So I think when you ask that question, there's just so many facets to think about. What about economic health? If you look at the people now are worried now at 65, do they have enough money to retire? How can we better plan so that people, when they put in all their hard work, can enjoy a long lived life and not worry about becoming homeless or food insecurity and things like that? So those are the things that have been occupying my mind, as well as educating younger people or just even older people about what's possible, and that we shouldn't just be complacent in accepting what is now, because the fact of the matter is by 2034, the estimates are that the number of people over the age of 65 in the United States are going to outnumber the number of people age 0 to 18. So we have to make adjustments to that. So my research has stemmed from very different areas to address this. My expertise has been in musculoskeletal and bone health. So I do have ongoing research to help people become the strongest they can, understand the factors that lead to fractures and falls, and to prevent them proactively. Now, you asked about AI. There's a lot in AI. So I think that a lot of what we can do is just a self-awareness of what our risks are. But in terms of the AI space, there are in-ear devices that are very small hearing aids that have accelerometers, meaning they can detect a fall, that can be hooked to Bluetooth, that could be hooked to a phone, which most people have cellular phones now, that could then alert someone as to a fall. And that's just one example. Or we have exoskeletons to help people walk more quickly and expend less energy that are in development here at Stanford. There are now apps on the phone to try to assess for environmental safety. So if people don't have access to an occupational therapist or a physical therapist, they can have the app kind of inform them what they need to do to better manage their fall risk and decrease the risk of falls. So there's just probably thousands that I don't even know about, but there's a lot going on in the AI space.
Right. Wow. It's amazing what you can do with AI in like any field at all. So we're going to take a break and continue on later.
Get a little messy while having a whole lot of fun. Mindful Makers explores the world around you and inspires you to think outside the box. Join Agnes and her friends as they share crafty projects and talk to local artists. Mindful Makers, Mondays at 6 p.m. on Rogers TV.
My name is Chase Nicholas. I am a Mi'kmaq hockey player. Growing up, I always remember my family talking about the Mi'kmaq as the creators of the game of hockey. In grade 7, I did research on Mi'kmaq hockey sticks as the first sticks of the NHL. I found a Mi'kmaq hockey stick made in 1917, the same year the NHL was formed. I was surprised to find out the very stick I was holding was made by my great-great-grandfather, Alexander Cope. In 1934, an elder known as Old Joe Cope wrote a letter to the Halifax Herald claiming the Mi'kmaq created hockey. I found out later that I am a direct descendant of Old Joe Cope. There was a time when Mi'kmaq children were torn from their families and not allowed to speak their language, losing their words and stories. But the stories are coming back to us. Stepping on the ice, I take pride knowing the roots of the game of hockey stem from my ancestors in the Mi'kmaq Nation.
Okay, well, welcome back, Dr. Kado. You have mentioned a few times now about your focus on osteoporosis, and I've also read that in 2007 you even defined hyperkyphosis, I hope I read that right, as a new geriatric term. So I was just a little bit curious about that. Could you tell me a little bit about it?
Oh, yes. So hyperkyphosis refers to the increased upper spine curvature that tends to get more pronounced as people age. And prior to embarking in this area, it had been called commonly the Dowager's Hump, which was a term coined in the UK in about 1944. And they even called it a widow's hump. And most people had thought it was due to underlying osteoporosis and vertebral fractures. But research that I did when I was a younger postdoctoral fellow at UCSF, where I had access to about 10,000 x-rays of older women starting at age 65, was able to kind of show that this forward curvature was not necessarily due to just underlying osteoporosis and vertebral fractures, but other things such as decreased muscle strength, degenerative disc disease. Even there was a suggestion of an underlying genetic component, so that if your parent had more pronounced kyphosis as they got older, you would also be more likely to do that. Yes, so we looked at some of the causes. We also were able to show that people who suffer from this type of posture would be more likely to develop worsening physical function over time, including an increased risk of falls, fractures, and even earlier mortality. So in about 2014 or so, I collaborated with Dr. Wendy Katzman, a physical therapist professor at UCSF, and we did some intervention studies that looked specifically at postural strengthening by back extensor strengthening exercises, as well as awareness. And we're able to show a decline, meaning in the progression. So people were actually able to improve their posture just working specifically on the core strength and the spinal extensor strength. So thank you for asking. Yeah, that's how I kind of first kind of continued in my academic role in research.
Oh, yeah, that's amazing. So you said that posture can help people in terms of their like progress in kyphosis. Would you say that it's also helpful for like ordinary people who don't have those sorts of issues, just in terms of posture, in terms of aging?
Oh, yeah. I think when your mother told you to stand up straight, there was some wisdom to that. Also, the old adage, use it or lose it, for sure are really important things to think about. There's so much about posture that says something about a person, and maybe even particularly as they get older, that if you can stand up straight and be erect, it kind of commands a presence. And old elders should be respected for all their life experiences and the fact that they've survived through them and are existing into this older age group. But that being said, even younger people, right? If they hold themselves kind of like this, it sends a totally different message. So I think posture is probably underrated. We don't think about it. And probably now for the rest of the show, I'm going to be sitting up straight.
Oh, well, thank you so much for that enlightening conversation on bone health. Are there any key messages that you would like our viewers to take to heart? And is there any particular action you would like to inspire them to undertake?
Sure. So I think one thing for the audience to consider is that sometimes we don't feel like we have a lot of power, but in fact, our mind is extremely powerful. So there have been a lot of researchers who have looked at mindset and making a determination of what somebody wants to do and being able to achieve that goal. As a geriatrician, we really focus on what we call what matters, and understanding and being able to develop goals. So for instance, I will ask my patients in the 90s, what are some of your goals for today? And I'd say half the time I get laughs, like, what goals? And I encourage the audience to really think about what your goals are, and not to think that just because I'm a certain age or of a certain infirmity, meaning I have disabilities in one area or the other, that you can't improve. Because in fact, studies show that particularly at an old age, if you make a change in your behavior, you have a goal, that you will be more likely to achieve it and enjoy a good success. So I guess that's what I would leave this audience with, that you have the power to make those decisions that are going to result in positive outcomes, but you have to believe it and you have to do the work.
Oh, yes, that's a really powerful message. I'm really glad that you were able to share that with the audience. When did you start thinking this way about this sort of thing? Like, has that always been a mindset that you've had?
So that is a great question, probably with your psychology background. But I would say probably if you had to characterize me from a younger age, I tended to be an optimist, but also one who is prepared. I think it was actually through my training and working through the AIDS epidemic that I learned from my patients who were faced with adversity and survived, and realized that anybody who survived had resilience. And sometimes the positivity and their ability to deal with really tough situations really affected me. And I saw how just even that mindset of thinking positive, regardless of what your situation is, will lead to a better outcome, and that we don't have control over all of the aspects of our lives, but that's okay. So probably my patients over my medical training helped me realize that. They taught me a lot.
Oh, yeah, that's lovely. I'm so glad that you were able to think that way, and I hope the audience can gain something from it as well. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Kado. Here's to aging gracefully and staying forever young.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
Our world is changing.
Now more than ever, we have seen firsthand the brutality of systematic racism.
Here in Canada, we can do better.
It is time to connect, commit, and change.
I'm Queen.
And I'm Aaliyah Ali, and we're inviting you to join us on Diverse and Converse.
We'll connect you with leaders from the Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities.
Now is the time for change.
I'm Nicole Martin, the proud ambassador for the Comfort Bear program. Comfort Bears provide these cuddly bears to local children who are terminally ill, facing trauma, or